So, Clive, we met recently at Samye Ling Retreat Centre on a weekend retreat that you were running, and I invited you to come onto this podcast. Thank you so much for saying yes. I'm really interested in hearing how you come to teach meditation, what your approach to teaching is, your pedagogy. So let's just go straight into it. It'd be lovely to hear how you got to this point in terms of your life as a mindfulness meditation teacher.
So as a teenager, I was very idealistic about philosophy. So I did a degree at Leicester University, and I still felt that I wanted to find out more. So I went to India for about a year. So I studied with some very, very good teachers, Goenka, who was the founder of like Vipassana in the West. So I had the privilege of actually doing a retreat with him before he was teaching publicly. So I spent 3 months doing that with other teachers. Like Joseph Goldstein was my next door neighbor in the retreat house. And then after 3 months in Bodh Gaya with Goenka, then I spent a lot of time in the Himalayas, like at Dharamsala, at the Dalai Lama's residence, but also in Darjeeling and Sikkim. So I got very, even more interested. When I came back to Europe, I started, different projects, but I started to volunteer at Samye Ling. So I became a printer at Samye Ling. I edited 2 books on Tibetan therapy called Taming the Tiger, which has gone into 16 languages, and Restoring the Balance. Then I did a 1-year retreat as a Buddhist monk, strict retreat, 4 o'clock till 11 o'clock every day for 400 days without a break. And then when I came out, my teacher said, "You're ready to teach." So since then, I've taught maybe 25,000 people all over the world, in South Africa, Finland, Scandinavia, Italy, South Africa. Anyway, so it's a kind of like a vocation to be a teacher.
So was there a pivotal moment, or was there somebody who stood out that kind of inspired you to become a teacher? Or did it just come pretty much just from within in some form or other?
It's maybe my first Tibetan teacher, Kagyu Rinpoche, had done 17 years in retreat over 3 or 4 periods. And I felt that he communicated so much grace, so much luminosity and clarity. So I felt like I wanted to be like that. And he gave me a refuge name, like you do in the Buddhist tradition, which was to understand the meaning, to spread the Dharma, which are the Dharma is the teachings of Buddha. So I think it was his example of being able to communicate a sense of relaxation and kindness that inspired me, that I want to present relaxation and kindness.
Can you give us a little bit of definition of how you see meditation and mindfulness?
So I think mindfulness is kind of a mistranslation of the original words. To my understanding, the original meaning was translated by people who were trying to translate the Protestant Bible to convert people, like in Southeast Asia countries. So mindfulness has an opposite, mindlessness, and they've translated it as mindfulness. But the original word to me is like recollection or remembering to remember. So it's like we forget we're in the present moment because we spin off into our ego stories, or we overthink, or we get over emotional. So remembering to remember is like a homecoming back to the present moment. So mindfulness is quite limited. I think meditation is something much faster. So what I'm trying to share is both. But to me, meditation is resting in a state of awareness with loving kindness. So there's those 2 elements. Meditation has a sense of interconnectedness and a sense of unconditional kindness, warm-heartedness, but also the marriage of intention and attention, so that there is always a quality of attention to do with meditation. But of course, that's easy to say, but hard to practice. But that's kind of the direction I'm trying to share. Yeah.
What about your personal practice of meditation? How has that evolved over time?
My personal practice was much more, to begin with, involved with like Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism. So I've done lots of mantra recitation and visualizations. So I still use those, but my practice depends on circumstances of my life. So my teacher would say that how can you recognize a good mindfulness teacher or meditation teacher? So The answer is if they're very flexible and adaptable. So while I'm here, I'm doing a lot of loving kindness meditations, but also mainly Vipassana meditation, just to, like a homecoming, coming back to the present moment and with gratitude and appreciation.
And do you have a view on the secular form of, I'll say mindfulness, because that's the way the secular form is usually referred to? Do you have a view on the value of this, or maybe any misconceptions that you encounter when you're out teaching others?
According to, say, Tibetan Buddhism, mindfulness is like a means to an end of understanding deep prajna or wisdom or insight. So it's like if you had the old-fashioned kind of Panasonic camcorder and you put it on the back of a horse with somebody riding for half an hour, then you played back the film, it would just be very colourful and noisy, but meaningless. But if the same camera was put on a motorized tripod, then it would be crystal clear, BBC quality sound and vision. So normally our mind is wandering and full of thoughts and kind of spinning off in any direction. So mindfulness is like putting the camera on a motorized tripod. But then what you see once you stop is that everything is like emptiness, is the nature of illusion or infinite possibility, so that the mind creates the world. So if we can really understand the way of the mind, it gives immense freedom of how we shape our future, because there's infinite possibility if we let go of the assumptions or the limitations of our normal mind. So mindfulness, I respect, is very valuable as far as it goes. And if it's done well, then it's really, really beneficial.
Thank you. I'd really like to start to move on to talk about your teaching practice, your pedagogy, if you like. I would just like to find out, first of all, how would you describe yourself as a teacher of meditation?
As a teacher, what I'm trying to convey is enthusiasm. Like, the Buddha said, one candle can light another 100 candles without diminishing its own flame. So what I'm trying to do is to convey a sense of joy to meditate. I think was it Pascal who said that all of the troubles in the world would end if people could just sit down in a quiet room and be with themselves. So that Pascal quote, is very useful. I think everybody's moving too fast. It's like the ego is caught up in aggressive speed. There is a sense of, this constant like tanha or craving that the Buddha used to talk about. So my mission really is to help people begin a practice. What I hope is people maybe would meditate at least half an hour a day, because the research shows that even half an hour a day is enough to light up more the choicefulness part of the brain, so that we can make conscious choices rather than be slaves to reactivity or autopilot. So all of the different courses are with that in mind, but to create a sense of joyfulness and not to be frightened of facing oneself. When so many people see the benefits of mindfulness, why does so few people keep a regular practice going? I think that there is that almost sense of unfamiliarity to people in the West of just sitting and not doing anything. So I'm trying to communicate a sense that we can all do this. We can all be meditators.
Thank you. I made a little list of qualities I thought came across when I encountered you at Samye Ling a few months ago. Just a few words that came to mind, nothing elaborate, but the words gentle came across to me. Humorous, personable, no ego, open-minded, and judicious in giving teachings at an appropriate level. And there was a wealth of understanding underpinning all of that as well. And I don't know whether any of those qualities you recognize in yourself.
I think that is inspiration. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, saying, "My religion is kindness." So kindness in our language is related to kin, which is like tribe. But deeper, the original word in Sanskrit, I think, is like metta, a sense of unconditional, warm-hearted friendliness. So I think that would be what I'm trying to get across, this unconditional, warm-hearted friendliness that can melt a lot of frozen, limited belief systems.
It makes me think how other people were a role model for you. Do you see yourself as a role model for others who want to practice or others who want to teach?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of benefit, and so I'm very glad that they see my qualities and that they try and overcome obstacles and be kind themselves. What is interesting in my background is that I've edited 2 books on Tibetan therapy. So when the Tibetans at Samye Ling came there, they taught meditation, but the people couldn't get it because there was a level of neurosis that they were trying to put the meditation on top of this foundation of neurosis. So it's like building a palace quicksand. Tibetan therapy is sowa, which means to heal any wounds that have, like in the psyche, of trauma, and to heal any wounds that are already there and to prevent with mindfulness any future wounds occurring. So it's like the path of purification of our neurotic tendencies so that those neurotic tendencies are not in charge of the actual meditation practice. So I immersed myself so thoroughly in 200 hours of transcripts of Tibetan therapy teaching, which I helped to edit into this Taming the Tiger, which is very resonant because it chimes in with internal family systems therapy. I don't know if you've come across that, IFS.
I have, but I haven't read a lot about it. I just wonder if you could maybe give a brief summary of that.
I think it's very useful for anybody coming to meditation to at least get into a short version of IFS, because it's inspired partly by great teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, people like that. So internal family systems therapy is saying that everybody has different selves, but the true self is one that has these qualities like compassionate, curious, courageous, connected, calm, clear, creative. All we have to do is to get back to our true self, and then our inner tiger, for instance, this wild aspect of the ego, doesn't have to be demonized, but can be transformed and brought into a structure, just like in a family where there's division in the family. So it's like the true self, like the Buddha self, is at the head of the table, and the other different selves respect the true self, the Buddha self, at the head of the table. And so the mind is the conductor of the orchestra. So there can be harmony within all the different facets or aspects of our psyche. So every meditation is like coming back to these qualities like compassionate, curious, courageous, clear, calm. So it gives it a sense of direction and purpose.
How do you think that you help facilitate that change? If we want to go a little bit deeper into how you help others to nurture or to discover those qualities within themselves.
I think there is something called the affiliative effect. So like the electromagnetic field of the heart is measurable to within like 5 meters of most people. So I think it's very inspiring, like to go to Buddhist countries, and they've had a sense, like even as babies, being taken to Buddhist ceremonies, and they've grown up with a safe attachment to Buddha in the sense that they feel really connected. So it's nothing cold that you've read out of a book, but it's something affiliative. It's something that you do as a family or in a group. So even if on a Zoom call, I'm trying to communicate that affiliative effect, the sense that you're included. So no one's excluded. And then the key word is to be safe. A lot of people are safety seeking, which is a kind of neurotic, self-defeating process. But if we can feel safe, we can relax. If we can relax, then we can meditate or do mindfulness practice much more deeply, because it's like if you boil water, you get loads of bubbles on the surface. But if the water is allowed to cool down, the surface of the water becomes like a mirror. So our mind is just to settle down. So I'm trying to communicate with my voice, with my humor, with my sometimes light-hearted way and poetry even sometimes I use. It's just to create a safe space. And that safe space is partly safe because of that affiliative effect, like a tribe of meditators. And because I think there's so much alienation and isolation and loneliness in a world where so many people use so much technology, like smartphones, that they give the illusion of connection, but it's not the real thing.
I think the phrase often used for this
Yeah,
is holding space. I don't know if you've ever used that term or come across that term, holding space for others. Is that how you would see it?
definitely. Holding space. I think meditation is like being prepared for whatever arises in the mind. That sometimes people can try and cling on to the good things and suppress their kind of shadow side or maybe difficult problems. But if you can have an open-hearted acceptance of everything, then that's the highway to processing experience. But if you run away from experience, then you make it even more powerful. So one of the teachers went to America and he saw a documentary about Native American Indians and one of them being called Sitting Bull. And he thought that was a really good meditator's name, Sitting Bull, like that you have this sense of very deep connection to the earth and that you're kind of grounded and that you feel safe and you feel connected. So then somehow human beings, just like they need sleep, I think in these times they need, some mindfulness isn't a luxury, it's a necessity.
Nicely put. Are there any circumstances in which you feel the need to challenge the people you teach? Because sometimes there is a need for a breakthrough, there's a need for insight, there's a need to push things further in terms of practice. So the weekend I was on with you, fairly light-hearted, not entirely introductory, but relatively introductory. I'm sure you've taught more advanced practitioners, and do you find that you're able to lift the challenge?
Maybe this kind of sense of curiosity. So if they ask a question, I'll turn it around. Curiosity is a very interesting thing. So I'll question them, is it true what you're saying? But then it's not confrontational, but it's asking them to look in the mirror of their own mind because the change can't come from outside. So I'm trying to create the causes and conditions for, like, say, on the last course, I did a full visualization from Taming the Tiger of visualizing the golden Buddha inside of your body. So this could bring up a lot of negativity, but then through people asking questions, and sometimes somebody will ask a question, like about their anger, and you can hear that they're angry about their anger. And that's the whole problem. It's like they say you can't think your way out of a negative emotion. So that person saw for themselves. They had their own little epiphany because I didn't even have to say hardly anything. But once it was out there, they could see, yes, I'm getting angry at anger. And that's not the purpose of the meditation. A lot of people who come to mindfulness have got mental health issues. So you challenge your comfort zone, but you stay in your self-care zone. Meditation is always challenging you to go beyond your comfort zone, but at the same time, you don't want to go outside of your self-care zone. T.S. Eliot said, humankind can bear very little reality, which is very profound. So sometimes if people haven't been meditating since they're children, there's loads of stuff that's unprocessed.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of a Tibetan proverb, if you can take care of the minutes, then the years take care of themselves. It's that it's organic. You've got to be patient with it. You will naturally unfold over time. I think some people maybe want to dive in, get the results quite quickly, of course. How do you work with people who have resistance, deep misunderstanding of what you're teaching, or disengaging from it? I don't know if you encounter this very often. I know people who come on retreat tend to be fairly like-minded and are there because they intended to be there for all kinds of reasons. But do you encounter this? And if you do, how do you work with it, would you say?
Yeah, I think one of the center things of my kind of ethos is acceptance. So I think acceptance is a very interesting word. Acceptance has this quality of welcoming everything that happens. So that resistance is normally ego, like behind the resistance, behind negativity, behind it all is the ego, because the ego can be very aggressive. So if you meet aggression with aggression, you'll only create more resistance. So I try to incorporate in all my weekends an exercise where you're actually encouraged to let go. Maybe in that circumstance, I wouldn't approach the person individually, but I would introduce to the group an exercise like of, especially make it physical. So like the kind of Tibetan breathing exercise where you lift your shoulders up, count to 4, hold the breath, count to 4, exhale through the mouth any negativity or resistance, so that then all of the emotions couldn't exist without the body. All of the thoughts couldn't exist without the body. So instead of intellectually engaging with an intellectual resistance, I try to make it visceral and physical. People who are very resisting, when they do walking meditation, they almost nearly kind of fall over because there's so much in their heads that they're not alive in their body. So the one very good way to process things is through physical movement. So that's why I do Qigong or Tai Chi in most of my weekends if I have the chance. Sometimes I do mindfulness retreats with yoga teachers. So I do an hour, they do an hour. So people really enjoy them. I think it's a very good combination. Also, normally a female, so that people can see a male teacher and a female teacher, and there's movement for an hour and there's sitting for an hour.
Yeah, the balance between movement and sitting seems to be a generally good approach to teaching a retreat or whatever, because it keeps people energized as well, doesn't it? But a lot of people really like to feel embodied, and that movement really helps that engagement, doesn't it? And the stillness, the rhythm of the stillness and the movement, the stillness before, the stillness afterwards, kind of resonates perhaps a little bit more than it does if you're just sitting a lot of the time.
Too much sitting is probably part of the problem in our culture.
Just a few more questions around your practice in relation to this rhythmic approach. I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you work with structure and planning and spontaneity in your teaching. How does that look like in your practice? And just maybe coming back behind that, how much preparation do you put into a retreat or a course in terms of that structure, and how much do you freeform from that, if you like?
Say I was teaching emotional intelligence, so I would read some of my notes from earlier courses. Maybe I would generate some new material. So for about 4 days before the course, I'd thoroughly immerse myself in the subject. So if anybody asked any questions, I would have the answers available. So the structure is to spend some time doing walking meditation, some time doing half an hour body scan, sometimes doing some breathing practices, and just like a variety of things. I'm trying to give a Swiss Army knife, so the old Swiss Army knife, you could have scissors or nail clippers or something to get stones out of horses' hooves, so that you've got a variety of practices. And then I try and use my website. So it's like just creating the motivation for people actually to engage, because it's all out there now. It's just that willingness to engage and go on the path rather than get stuck.
And do you work differently when you're working one-to-one with people?
I think in a one-to-one situation, it's completely different, really. I don't do so much of that now because I don't see myself as somebody special in any way. So I like to think of myself as like a Kalyana Mitra, this kind of phrase in Sanskrit, which means like a spiritual friend. So I'm trying to be friends to people. And in a one-to-one situation, I think you have to be so careful, because a lot of people think that they're meditating, but they're not. Meditation is something incredibly deep. And one of my teachers would say that to teach mindfulness well, that you'd at least have to do 1 year in retreat to go through your own obstacles thoroughly. So I'm just trying to help people move on in their journey. But at the moment, it tends to be small groups, which is between 30 and 50. I used to teach more than that, but now sort of 40 or 50. And then people can come to me in the breaks like they do and talk to me one-to-one. And then that's very informal. But then anything can happen in that context. And it's like sometimes it's opening Pandora's box for people when they come across meditation. So you have to be there like as a parachute or something.
Do you teach lots of different types of groups? Do you have specialist courses that you put on for specific groups of people?
I used to do like meditation, like for in the workplace, so like in local councils and things like that. But also I used to work with the Mindfulness Association, so I would be doing a lot of things on specific topics. I know His Holiness the Dalai Lama has got a book out like a year ago saying the only way we can change the planet for the good is to teach the children mindfulness and meditation, because if you get it at a very early age, it's much easier to have it for life. I think it's hard if people are already 20 or 30 or 40 that they're full of conditioning. then that conditioning has to be overcome for them to meditate effectively.
And just on that point around conditioning, do you see the aim of a teacher to deconstruct the conditioning rather than construct something new, if you like?
Well, it's like in the Hindu pantheon, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. So like Brahma is like the creator, Shiva is the destroyer, and Vishnu is the imaginative reconstruction after the destruction. Like when I did a year in retreat, the first 3 months were really deconditioning some of the limited belief systems that I had and some of the like neural pathways, you'd call it now, to do with habitual thinking. So there's a very good imagery for this. Like if you're given a very, very beautiful piece of silk that's got muddy stains on it, and you follow all the right instructions for dyeing a piece of silk, but all you have is the stains of the mud underneath the golden saffron of the silk. As if you somehow removed all the stains from the beautiful piece of silk, then you can dye it a beautiful saffron color. So in a way, that purification aspect is like to purify what are we purifying? The conditioning that we are just a collection of thoughts, an incessant, interminable monologue, and that there's no choice about it. So it's like cleaning the piece of silk and then dyeing the piece of silk a beautiful color. I think ideally there's this letting go of the conditioning, because it's like we're in a culture of gorillas with smartphones. It's like we have prehistoric emotions, but we have the technology of gods or from another planet. And there's a huge mismatch there. We have to purify the conditioning. A lot of the conditioning around consumerism and materialism and image and even the education system. But there's all of these things to decondition, and then you can recondition. We assume that part of that true self is something alien and foreign. So we look outside. The Buddhism is about always looking within. Just by meditating, we're heading in the direction of awakening the sleeping Buddha inside of us. And the Buddha, when he got enlightened, he didn't say, I'm a god or I'm a teacher. He said, I am awake. So the Tibetan word means someone who's awake.
You mentioned earlier about going on a retreat for a year. How important do you think retreats are for teachers of meditation and mindfulness?
I was really struck when I had the privilege of being in Bodh Gaya, and Goenka was about to teach a 10-day retreat. There were 200 people from all over the world there. But before that, he did a 10-day retreat himself. And he led about half a dozen of us who were there. But even somebody as advanced in meditation as that they do a 10-day retreat at that time, before leading a 10-day retreat, I think we lead by example. So I think it's essential that people do retreat. It's like yin and yang, maybe. It's like you have to go in to go out. And if you're always talking about it, then you become empty, and it can just be like just words, like a parrot. But if it's actually your own genuine experience, you can see yourself how we all succumb to mistakes. You could be the meditation teacher on a retreat, and 6 days into the retreat, you could be just fantasizing about, different lunch, that you don't like Indian, you want Italian. And then you could catch yourself after half an hour, grumbling about perfectly good food. So all of this, the ability to see oneself, like to be able to look in the mirror and then to take the inspiration from those voyages in inner space to be able to share the experience to others. Like in Zen Buddhism, they talk about, say, someone who's been in the mountains on retreat for a year, a month, and when he comes back, they say he's returning to the marketplace with bliss bestowing hands. So I love this idea that his body is full, and that is just coming from his hands, so that the fruition of retreat is that you have more energy.
More attunement, more awareness, be able to read the body language of your students,
absolutely,
or people you're working with. The other thing as well, when you understand your own mind, those are triggers for your teachings. So if I'm guiding meditation, my mind wanders, that's a trigger for me to say something. If your mind wanders, etc. Do you use that technique in your teaching?
My teaching is a bit different. Like my Tibetan teacher would say, go into a room and just to feel the energy of the room, maybe for 3 or 5 minutes, or maybe even say something just to see what the people are ready to hear. So it's very spontaneous for every course I've given. There is that element of spontaneity about it according to the room. So I'm trying to intuit what would be very beneficial for people in the room. Like recently, I didn't know it, but somebody had, a young woman had lost her husband, and I'd said just one sentence, and that was enough that she said it to herself for a year, every day afterwards to get her through. So it's like that, planting seeds. So it's like to choose maybe just one sentence or a couple of sentences. Somebody can really see what is going on there. Then they can have their epiphany from that and hold on to that as like something that is true to them. So I'm really trying to like broadcast seeds there when I'm teaching. So it's very different. It's what my Tibetan kind of meditation teacher, that's how he told me to teach. So I tend to teach in that way. Not always, but mostly. It's very intuitive, very spontaneous.
I think what's also coming across for me is the importance of simplicity and directness.
Simplicity is key. Do you know that there is a Buddha of infinite simplicity? There's a statue of him in the stupa at Samye Ling. So I love that. So when I was in retreat, every day I'll be doing prostrations to the Buddha of infinite simplicity. So that is everything. We live in a complicated society.
It's a bit like dropping a pebble in a pond. You give it space to resonate because it's so simple. When you add layers and layers of words, you complicate and cover up the teaching.
I would say that's the biggest obstacle is the egocentric grasping, egocentric habits. So maybe the last bastion of the ego is the intellect. So it will make things complicated so that they're inaccessible, and then it can protect its domain. So it's like they say the ego makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. We can twist things to make them complicated when in fact it's incredibly simple.
Quick fire questions to move towards the end of this podcast. First one is, what would you say you're particularly good at as a teacher?
Embodying stability, maybe.
Great, thank you. What emerging trends or research or teachings or anything that you've read or what you're seeing happening within the meditation world is of interest or excites you?
So recently I've read a book which I'm not on commission, but I would thoroughly recommend, from Oxford University, Taking Mindfulness Deep by Danny Penman and Mark Williams. So they're investigating, as you probably know, the Vedanas. Now with the neuroscience, the evidence is really exciting that they can see how a Vedana becomes a reactivity pulse, and the reactivity pulse can lead to the sense of egocentric self and grasping. So if we can only go back to the original teachings of the Buddha and see that they're maybe much more profound and relevant than we could ever dream of. So I've read the book a couple of times, and the next course I'm doing in Glasgow, I'll be incorporating meditations on the feeling tone of the Vedanas, but also Judd Brewer and his books on understanding anxiety. So the neuroscience, again, how to hack into your survival brain, your very deepest brain, and overcome anxiety or eating disorders. So there's a start.
Yeah, great. Thank you. How do you think mindfulness or meditation teaching needs to evolve? Or what does an ideal future of meditation education look like to you?
I think it could be incorporated more into the school curriculums. And university, some of my friends are university lecturers, and they say that especially since COVID, there's so much anxiety amongst their students now. And I've got school teachers who come to my classes who have anxious children. Like, I can't even dream that people can be that anxious. When I was that age, it wasn't there like that. So I think that specifically mindfulness training to help with things like anxiety, with depression, with low self-esteem. So self-compassion is very valuable there as well.
If you were to give any advice to any new mindfulness meditation teachers, what would it be if they were just starting out?
So be humble. You know, like Suzuki Roshi said, in the beginner's mind, there's infinite possibility, but in the experts, there's very few. So I think when you're beginning, if you've read all the books and you've done it a lot yourself, but just to see that every person in front of you that you're teaching is have respect for them. They've all got their own troubles that they never talk about. And that when they start to meditate, they're starting to maybe see some of those. and to give them the toolkit so that they make matters a lot better. That they don't, there are so many 84,000 different teachings of the Buddha to do with the 84,000 obstacles. So there will always be something that will help. So if you're beginning, sort of feel grateful for the opportunity, but humble in relation to that anybody can, read out instructions, but the heart of them is to have a mind that is clear and calm and compassionate and courageous and curious and creative. All of these qualities, try to embody them.
Can you share any practical teaching tips for new or experienced teachers?
If it's the right time, even with advanced meditators, like, for half an hour, just sit, but don't meditate. So you turn it all on its head. People are trying so hard to be mindful. But if you say don't meditate, then often people can start to be introduced to something a little bit more different and more relaxed. Because if you take out the struggle, that struggle is ego. So don't meditate, just rest. And then somehow that can work. Not with everybody, but with some people.
Great, thank you. Do you have a favorite reading or a quote that resonates with your teaching or you think would be of value to others?
This is just a paraphrase, but it's the famous Rumi poem, this being human is like a guest house. Every day there's new arrivals. Welcome them all at the door laughing, even if they'll seem to be violently sweeping your house clear of all of its furniture. But then there's another verse to that poem that I found in a book of Rumi poetry. So after that, welcome everything that arises, but understand the truth that only true human beings know, that the moment you accept what obstacles arise, then the doorway to wisdom opens. On this planet, it's like you have to hold grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, without that tendency to want to shut out the grief, or even worse, to go into the abyss of grief so that all of the other emotions get swallowed up. So it's this ability to hold grief in one hand and gratitude in the other. So I think Rumi is saying that at the end, that true human beings know this wisdom, that if you accept everything without that preference of I like it, I don't like it, or I'll ignore it, or I'll deny it, which is the essence of ego, if we can accept it without that ego shellfish resistance. So Rumi, I think, is a very good inspiration. A lot of his poems are very, very good.
Very well paraphrased, by the way. And where can people go to find out more about what you do? I know you've got a website.
cliveholmes.co.uk, and shortly I'll be trying to launch some 8-week online courses. People are very welcome to join me there.
It's been a privilege to be able to talk to you about your practice. There's so much depth in there, and I'm sure we could talk for a long time, but thank you so much.
You're very welcome.